requesting Mr. Mehra to continue the evening program, and he has important introductions to make. Mr. Mehra.
Thank you, CV. It's not just a continuation of the program. It's something that I am really looking forward to. And as I mentioned a little earlier, someone I'm looking forward to here, and that is Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra, who's been gracious enough to consent to be our speaker this evening. And Amit has, of course, contacted him. We tried to get in touch with him. Some were successful, some not. But ultimately, the delightful thing is that everything that is good has to happen. And this is what's happening here. Rajiv, we are delighted to have you with us, and we look forward to your talk. Before the talk, I'd just like to mention that in this age of computerization and internet, and every time you walk into a bank now, you suddenly find half the bank is empty. So I asked one manager, I said, what's happened to all the people? He said, sir, you guys are all on the internet. Whenever you want to transfer money, you want to do whatever, you're doing it from the home or from your telephone or whatever. So people are leaving. People don't have enough to do, but they'll find something else. Which set me thinking and reminded me of a lovely thing that Mr. T.S. Eliot has written. He said, every time I walk into a bookshop and I see that someone has written a book, I am delighted to know that civilization is still alive. And I think that applies very much to our evening speaker. Now, before I request him to come here, very quickly I'll read out, I don't want to read it out quickly because it's such a fantastic, not a biodata, but a kind of a summary of what he's done, and will continue to do, I'm sure. Because there's this much talent, there's no way we can leave that. Rajiv, of course, is author, filmmaker, and trustee secretary, Foundation of His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. He's also the author of several books on spirituality and on Buddhism in particular. His 9 books have been published in 50 languages and editions. They include several books on His Holiness, Understanding the Dalai Lama, The Essential Dalai Lama Penguin Conversations on the Living and Happiness. Other books have also included a much acclaimed biography of Shri Ramakrishna, Thakur's Spirit of the Muse and Mind of the Guru. He is the producer-director. It's no mean feat. He is the producer-director of more than 650 documentary films. I think that deserves a clap. These have been selected for 1,500 plus film festival screenings by juries around the world, winning more than 285 international and 30 national awards for him. And personally, the 30 national awards were personally from the President of India. He is managing trustee, producer, and commissioning editor of the Public Services Broadcasting Trust, which we all know, all of us know, is the PSBT. Rajiv has twice addressed the plenary session of the World Economic Forum. Now, look at the bandwidth of what we are talking about, and that's why the excitement is building up for this evening. At Davos, and he was nominated as the global leader for tomorrow by the Davos committee. He was a judge of the Templeton Prize for Spirituality. He first delivered the numerous talks and lectures on a variety of subjects related to spirituality, in particular on Buddhism and on His Holiness, the Dalai Lama. For decades, he was the host of one of India's longest running and most widely viewed talks. These are the talk shows in public television, in conversation with a familiar figure as a news anchor. So with this kind of a background, I think you can all collectively just throw me off the stage, and we are humbly requesting Rajiv to please come and talk to us. Thank you very much.
Goodness. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very tough act to follow, particularly before an audience, committed to nurturing and cultivating quality. Ever since I had this, I went into the men's room, looked at the mirror, and tried to sort of assess what kind of quality that I could bring to this discourse. And I was reminded that when my first book was published about 30 years ago, I was very proud and pleased that His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who'd been my teacher then for about 5 years, agreed to release the book. And I was very elated. And so the book was released, photographs were taken, I said my little piece, and then His Holiness spoke. And so he said, well, Rajiv works very hard. He's been a good student, but how much he knows, I don't know. So, despite the seemingly flattering biographical note, that really was the judgment of my teacher. And about some years ago, I went back to him and I said, Your Holiness, it's been 35 years, I've been a student of yours, nothing is happening. I mean, I'm still frequently miserable and I'm still struggling. And so he said, well, what's the hurry? It takes eons of lifetimes. So I wanted to reassure you that the struggle and the challenge to achieve quality, certainly in the area that interests me, is going to take eons of lifetimes. And this is particularly relevant at a time when we have instant everything, including instant enlightenment, 5-day courses to past life regression therapy. You hear a lecture and you have transcended into happiness. What I did want to share with you a little bit was my own journey, learning and struggles in training the mind. And ultimately, it is the mind that filters our experience. And I believe that all of us human beings, we basically all want the same thing. We might define it differently, and that is we want to be happy. And we want to be happy, and we want to avoid suffering. And the instrument of processing and experiencing that is the mind. And we spend countless hours in equipping ourselves with our haircuts, a problem I don't have. And in fact, one of the great liberations for me was that when I lost all my hair and I grew a beard, that I didn't have to worry about traveling with a razor or even a comb or worrying about my beard. This is a once-a-month job. But the amount of time we spend on the little things, in training ourselves, for the food we enjoy, the physical exercises we do, the clothes we wear, and even the professional skills we acquire, whether it's to be a sports person, to pursue quality in the arena of production and business and manufacturing. And yet that whole process of education that we go through spends very little time on just plain, simple training the mind. And today, research in neuroplasticity has shown that just like you can, by repeating a particular, movement of the hand, you can strengthen this muscle. Similarly, you can retrain the neurobiology of the mind by exercising the mind or by giving it particular forms of what we call mental diet. And so the plea really was, and this is something that I've learned from the many great teachers that I have been privileged to study with and to meet, was the emphasis and the effort that we need to make on training the mind. And it is really India's very rich civilizational heritage. And we're here to sort of celebrate and India's culture and a great master musician who you will hear shortly. What is the cornerstone of our civilizational heritage and the aspiration that it recommends to us? And what are the pillars of the aspiration of the human potential? It is basically nurturing the mind, and its pillars are concentration and the cultivation of compassion. And the techniques that it teaches are fundamentally towards that end. And concentration is something that we sometimes accidentally arrive at, because when we're very interested in some things, our minds will concentrate. But that concentration is driven by our motivation, by our interest, which may not always be conducive to the mind. So it is what you concentrate on that has great significance, or what you use to concentrate the mind. Now that's fairly self-evident, that when you use training techniques from breathing, from yoga, or meditation, or whatever, to concentrate the mind. But I think the more important and interesting aspect is the idea of compassion. And this is something that really comes from my interest in Buddhism. And the Dalai Lama is considered the reincarnation of Avalokiteshvara, the Buddha aspect of compassion. Of course, he's very quick to deny that he is an incarnation of a Buddha, and he just describes himself as a simple Buddhist monk. Now, as a sense of the degree of striving or aspiration for compassion, in Buddhism we have the concept of a bodhisattva. And who is a bodhisattva? A bodhisattva is someone, unlike in the Hindu tradition, who seeks enlightenment in order to be able to choose his rebirth and be reborn in the human condition and the suffering of the human condition to teach and serve humanity. So a bodhisattva doesn't seek enlightenment in order to break out of the cycle of birth and rebirth, but his commitment to others is so emphatic that he will choose to take rebirth. Now, compassion is not just a goody-goody thing. Compassion is a very practical matter, because research, and today there is, in the universities in the United States, there's the Dalai Lama Center for the Study of Compassion and Ethics at MIT, there's Richard Davidson at Wisconsin, those of you who are interested in mindfulness, John Kabat-Zinn at Massachusetts General Hospital, Stanford, who are actually researching the value of cultivating compassion. And why they're looking at compassion in particular is two reasons. One is that people like Daniel Goleman, a lot of people who read Emotional Intelligence, is a very popular book, have researched and have sort of presented data, hard data from psychological testing that shows that people who are depressed, who are anxious, who have psychological problems, in any conversation tend to use the word I, me, mine. So whenever there is an obsession with the self, there is an exaggerated sense of self, we experience pain and suffering. And when we can outer direct that to other people, our sense of self softens. And as our sense of self softens, we tend to experience suffering a lot less. And what are the methods that our civilization or our heritage offers us? Numerous. And in my sort of limited vocabulary, I see the process as being, we start with knowledge. So you look at data and you understand something and you read it. And then there's knowledge, there's understanding. And I think that, you can listen to a very charismatic speaker and go away impressed, and then lose what has been said. Because until it impacts the deepest recesses of your consciousness so that it becomes a reflex response, it's meaningless. It's academic. It's knowledge, some of it we may understand. But until we have internalized it so deeply that it's a reflexive response, and that is the genius of our heritage. So we have people like, most recently, in our history of spiritual masters, was Sri Ramakrishna. And I was greatly privileged to be a student of Swami Ranganathananda, former president of the Ramakrishna Mission. And one of the great joys of my life was that Swamiji and His Holiness became great friends. And what was interesting again was that here was, Ramakrishna, for those of you who are familiar with this, was a bhakta, was a devotee in the bhakti tradition of devotion. And yet Swami Vivekananda, his primary disciple, went on to say that Ramakrishna was my master, but the Buddha was my Ishta, an agnostic. Now, what does that tell us about two things? About our civilization and about the techniques for transformation. Now, what did Ramakrishna do? Ramakrishna was a pujari, a temple priest at a small temple run by a lower caste Maharani near Calcutta. He goes through the practices of the entire range of the Hindu tradition. Without going too much into the semantics of it, whether it was Dvait, philosophy of duality, Advait, the Tantra, Bhakti, Gyan, the whole range of practices he went through, and this is someone who was considered an incarnation of the divine. Why would he need to go through these practices? Because he was making a point. He was demonstrating something. Then he didn't stop there. He goes outside the temple precincts and sets up a kutir, a cottage, where he engages in the practices of Islam. He does the namaz. He does that with Christianity. He does it with Sikhism. And what does that tell us? It tells us two things. It tells us about the enormous inclusiveness of our heritage. That a pujari, Rama Krishna, an incarnation of the two of them, is able to go down there and not just to the practices of Hinduism, but of other faiths. And it tells us something else which is much more important, or equally important. The aspect of inclusiveness is very important in our times of divisiveness. But what it also tells us is that each one of us, and that is the uniqueness, each one of us has a different practice. My father has a certain practice. I have a different practice. Each one of us evolves our own practice that is particular to our needs. And so Swami Vivekananda said that he came up with and he devised 4 archetypes. And so he said, the Jnana Yogi, the person who is sort of intellectual, he will follow the path of knowledge to gain wisdom. The Karma Yogi of action, the Bhakti of devotion, and Raj Yoga of psychic practice, of the advanced techniques of breath control or what have you. And each human being within these archetypes is seen as a permutation, combination, a mixture, balance of this. So in our tradition, we say that just like each one of us needs a different physical diet. If I'm putting on weight, I need a particular diet. If I'm in a cold climate, I need a particular diet. Depending on who I am, I need a particular diet. Similarly, each one of us needs a different mental diet. And so we have to recognize what that mental diet is. Maybe a little bit of trial and error like we do with foodstuffs, and to find an appropriate mental diet to train our minds. There's no one size fits all. And so that is the great challenge for quality control and spirituality. And that is the huge diversity of great teachers like, I believe the Dalai Lama, the Ramakrishna Mission, so many others. I don't want to take too many names. But there are also so many charlatans that we can fall prey to in terms of what is being taught to us. But what is implicit also in all these aspirations of the spiritual is a wonderful Indian phrase, sadhana, effort and practice. You ask my friend who's going to perform after this. He's been a student of Pandit Ravi Shankar. And what the enormous, the huge element of surrender to the teacher. And why was that guru or the teacher important? Because he could, with the utmost sophistication and detailing, with specificity, point to what particular mental diet you needed. When the British came into India, they were outraged. Oh, land of heathens. Why? Because there are a million gods. Have we thought about why there were a million gods? And who are these gods? Do they exist? As a Buddhist, I believe that they're all projections of our minds. And we in our practice, we project a deity, we work with the deity, and then we dissolve it into ourselves. But it's very important to understand what purpose that deity serves, because it's such a common aspect of our existence and practice. And why do we have a million deities? How have they evolved? So you have some basic archetypes, you'll have Shiva and you'll have Ganesh and what have you. But through years of practice, through great masters, and I'll give you an example in my own case. Now, at one point, believe it or not, His Holiness, my teacher, and first, Swami Ranganathan, felt that I was reticent. I needed to be more, reaching out, needed to be more aggressive, not with aggression, but to be more affirmative or forceful. And so they recommended a wrathful deity. So what happens is that when I visualize and I worship a particular form of deity, I invite into myself the qualities of that deity. Now through millennia, different masters began to modify. So you see Ganesh, I'm not talking about sort of, the op-ed art of what people are doing with Ganeshi, but historically, you will find Ganeshi has a trunk to the left, one to the right, in different forms, different shapes. And each one is communicating a particular emotion. I mean, for our Western friends, we know that in the West, there's a lot of, you must be using color in your products. That, what kind of color has an appeal. You have industrial aromas. So when a person walks into a new car, he wants to smell a new car. And so you put in a particular aroma. So similarly, a great master can sometimes devise a deity, if not an archetype, that will impact your consciousness to address the specificity of your needs psychologically. So I just wanted to share the spirit and a sense of the enormous genius of our heritage that has helped through millennia, and the ways that we can use that to train our minds and to find happiness. And just a word on the notion of happiness. Happiness, unfortunately, is an English word, largely inspired by the American Constitution. And I think that's a challenge that comes up when you're looking at quality and ethics. And I don't know. I mean, I'd love to have a one-on-one conversation with Mr. Vaklu or people from business as to how you reconcile, because our philosophy tells us that to cultivate desires or to encourage desires is antithetical to the pursuit of happiness. So if as a business person, if I'm creating desire for a product that is not needed, Gandhiji famously said that is enough for our needs but not our greeds. So, but if we're looking to actually satiate people's greed and have them buy things or renew their latest cell phone even when they don't need to, how we can balance that within an ethical framework and the pursuit of happiness. Because our philosophy tells us the very basis of unhappiness is that because we are constantly grasping at what is impermanent. So I will just say a few words. I've exhausted my 15 minutes. But the key aspect, the two key aspects are philosophically, is the understanding of impermanence. And why is that important? Because everything is in a constant state of change because of causes and conditions, which means, that we're growing older from, we begin dying from the moment we're born, so we're going through a process of change. Everything we encounter, engage in, is changing in some way or the other because of temperature, because of its inherent quality and what circumscribes it. We are changing, and what we're grasping at is changing. Now that's a very dangerous composition. Because if I'm changing and we're both changing, and we want to hold on to our image of ourselves at age 19, or the image of the woman I married when I was 30 and she was 28, and we are both changing at the same time, that's a very, very difficult matter to sustain and to sustain satisfaction from. It's actually impossible, because we constantly have to be modifying our taste, our preferences, and our priorities. And it is also counter to the very principle of reality, because reality is not a constant. And so in a sense, that's what we're exploiting when we're trying to create a market for a product that no one needs. And is that a reason why the planet is confronting the crisis it is in terms of the environment, production of weapons, where, another minor tangent, I think the great crisis is that because we have not sufficiently trained our minds to process and assimilate this. It horrifies me, with apologies to Americans that are here, that, just look at the incredible nature of the American state in a positive way. Look at its institutions, look at its think tanks, look at its universities. And the product is Donald Trump. And weaponization, which defies all reason and logic. So obviously, our traditional approaches to knowledge and to training ourselves and our planet are failing. And we have to begin to look at an alternative discourse. And not just a discourse, and that's what I want to conclude with, is and to look at the techniques that India's civilization offers to change that fundamental matrix of the mind that grasps and seeks. And a personal note, whenever I meet, this used to happen with my teachers, and whenever I meet my teacher, and this is sometimes, it'll be a gathering and he's walking by and I'm standing, he'll whisper into my ear, practice, practice, practice. And what is that practice? That's some of the things I was telling you about. And today we hear so much about meditation. What is the essence of meditation? The essence of meditation is to consciously give ourselves a different mental diet. What do we do in meditation? In meditation, you visualize the deity, you visualize something, you think of something, and by repeating that to yourself, if it's a mantra, you must know the meaning of the mantra. So it's not just about, I see a lot of context in corporate training of, is basically de-stressing, which means to relax you so that you can do more of what is causing you stress in the first place. No, that is the sad dichotomy of it. That's really what we're doing. But meditation, as it historically understood, is to change our mental diet and to consciously provide an alternative diet to the mind so that over a period of time, it can antidote and change how and what we think. So just remember, it's really all about practice, 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 in the same ways that we train for our jobs, that we train to how we look, we train our bodies, we need to train our mind. If anyone would sort of hazard a question, I should be happy to try and respond to it meaningfully, if I can. Oh, great. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Rajiv Mehrotra ji. It's always a pleasure listening to you speak and address the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, we shall now move on. And this calls for the easy bit or the leisurely bit of the evening now, because we have with us a person who does not need much of an introduction from me over here, but yet I'll take a moment to just introduce him to all of you today. There's already been a lot that has been spoken about him, and you have already been told. I have an idea or an assumption that you will be knowing whom I shall be talking about, but still, I shall give you a brief introduction about how far has he come in his journey of music till date. Well, I'm talking about Pandit Shubhendra Rao. He is an internationally acclaimed performer, composer, cultural entrepreneur, and a music educator. His relentless service in promoting Indian music has made him a highly respected figure in the field of music and education across the world. Along with that, he has performed at major music festivals and prestigious concert halls like Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, Sydney Opera House, to name a few. As a composer, Shubhendra Rao distinguishes himself to push the boundaries of classical music and creating music for artists across cultures. He has composed for and worked with Dutch cellist Saskia Rao de Haas, American jazz guitarist Freddie Bryant, Iranian musicians, Japanese legendary singer Yoko Murayama, Chinese pipa maestro Gao Hong, to just name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a pleasure for us to have him as the man who shall be entertaining us with his music tonight as the final culmination of the entire day for all of you today. While the stage gets set up, I'll just take a moment over here and invite Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra back on the stage, please, for a moment, because we wish to honor him with a small memento as a token of gratitude from our end for him. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome him. And with the honors, I would like to invite Mr. Amit Chatterjee to kindly come up and present him with the memento. There's enough space for you, I think, ladies and gentlemen, even in front if you wish to, there's a lot of space. You can please. Oh, please, sir. You should take the center of the stage there, sir, please. Well, I guess always an inspiration, even through the few words that he has to say to us, always. Ladies and gentlemen, let's now move on, and please put your hands together and welcome on stage now Shri Shubhendra Rao, and along with him on the tabla, he will be accompanied by Pranshu Chaturlal. Please put your hands together, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome them on the stage for the final gig of the evening. Thank you. We hope you enjoy it. Internationally acclaimed performer, composer, cultural entrepreneur, and a music educator. His relentless service in promoting Indian music has made him a highly respected figure in the field of music and education across the world. Along with that, he has performed at major music festivals and prestigious concert halls like Kennedy Center for Performing Arts, Sydney Opera House, to name a few. As a composer, Shubhendra Rao distinguishes himself to push the boundaries of classical music and creating music for artists across cultures. He has composed for and worked with Dutch cellist Saskia Rao de Haas, American jazz guitarist Freddie Bryant, Iranian musicians, Japanese legendary singer Yoko Moriyama, Chinese pipa maestro Gao Hong, to just name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and a pleasure for us to have him as the man who shall be entertaining us with his music tonight as the final culmination of the entire day for all of you today. While the stage gets set up, I'll just take a moment over here and invite Mr. Rajiv Mehrotra back on the stage, please, for a moment, because we wish to honor him with a small memento as a token of gratitude from our end for him. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome him. And with the honors, I would like to invite Mr. Amit Chatterjee to kindly come up and present him with the memento. There's enough space for you, I think, ladies and gentlemen, even in front, if you wish to, there's a lot of space. You can please. Oh, please, sir. You should take the center of the stage there, sir, please. Well, I guess all